Good afternoon. So we've just gone midday. There's one session after me and then it's lunch, so hopefully everyone can last that time. So I just want to say thank you very much for attending this session today. Over the next 20 minutes, I hope to be able to share with you what we've learned about the aging population and just to provide a bit of background about who I am. So about 25 years ago, I did my master's at the Harvard School of Public Health on the aging population and the impact on the global economy. It is something that I will talk about later about what that really means. But there's a common phrase people say in life. The only thing you can't avoid is death and taxes. Well, actually, I think we've learned that you can avoid tax. There's lots of Channel 4 documentaries will tell you, but death you can't. And what does that really mean? I'll talk a bit about sort of what it means to the workplace as well, because there are more and more colleagues who are coming out of COVID much more conscious about what illness and what death means to everyday life. So I would like to just ask everyone to stand up, if that's possible. Thank you. Right. Okay, so I'm going to ask 3 questions, and if any of these do not apply to you, sit down, okay? So do you or someone you know have an immediate family member, so this could be a parent, grandparent, or even your spouse or partner, who you know fell sick in the past couple of years? So if you've had no one who's fallen sick in your immediate family over the last few years, please sit down. Okay, that's great. Okay. Have you or someone you've known ever taken time off for a family medical emergency? Okay. And because of this medical emergency, did you or the person you know feel completely overwhelmed about the situation? All right, okay, so the remaining people here, you or the person you know is a carer in the workplace. This is daily life for some people or reality. Yes, please all sit down, sorry, thank you very much. The reason why I wanted to share this with you is because the UK stats now show that 1 in 5 employees in the workplace are carers. There's a lot that's covered about childcare and early. I'm a mother. I used to be a young mother, not anymore. And then there's a lot of talk about sort of what we call supporting the younger population. But that is something that is very well talked about. However, what people don't know is 10.6 million people in the country right now are unpaid carers, of which 7.7 million of them are working. So these are people who are juggling working during the day and then carrying the burden of what we call family caring duties in their head, and every night they may be going home to look after someone who's got a long-term chronic illness or going to hospital. I won't talk a lot about the company that I run, but we notice that traffic goes up a lot during lunchtime and after hours and we know people are juggling, trying to figure out what to do with themselves when they're in a caring situation or when they have the spare time during the day. 2.1 million people become new carers every year. And what that means is about 2.1 million people stop becoming carers for someone elderly due to death, but then 2.1 million people suddenly find themselves quite unprepared in the workplace because they realize that there's literally a family emergency that I have to take care of and now I need to sort it out. And typically they'll take 2 weeks off work and then there's an array of choices they have to make. Now, why does this matter? Because 83% of them there was a survey that was run quite recently, 83% of them say they feel depressed. They think they're clinically depressed, but they haven't had time to go get diagnosed. And they feel incredibly isolated at work because they can't talk about it. So I'd like to share this with you. This is a picture of my car windscreen. This is actually the picture that changed my entire life. So 2 years ago, I think it was December 12th, my father had gone into hospital with what I didn't know at the time was a stroke and a heart attack, and my husband had a kidney infection. It was a 4-hour drive between both of them, and I think for about 2 weeks I was like a yo-yo driving up and down the country between hospitals. And this was a moment where I sat in the hospital car park and I just realized this is going to be my life. There's nothing, yes, there's work, there's things I'm very passionate about at work, but this is going to be more and more of my reality as I go forward in the next couple of decades of my life. And I realized then, I'm not alone, there's 10.6 million of people like this, why are there no solutions? And I remember having quite a few sleepless nights saying, who do I call when I'm completely lost? when there's no, when the doctors are closed, when the local authorities are closed, work can't help you. They'll give you time off maybe, but there's no one really to support you through that situation. And so just to give a bit of background, I used to run Uber Europe. I was head of DEI there, I was co-chair for women, but I actually ran operations for about 20 countries. I quit my job. I basically said, you either can sit here and worry that this is always going to be the problem you're going to be faced with, or you kind of try and create a solution to solve for this problem. And my employer, unfortunately, had nothing that they could provide for me other than a very empathetic manager who said, take your time. I took conference calls from my steering wheel. It was, you on a phone with a little Zoom camera, and people are saying, no, don't worry about it, and then you come off the call, and all you can hear is the rain on your car, and you were staring out the windscreen. So this moment was a real sort of defining moment for me in my life. And why does it really matter? If I'm one of 10.6 million people, why does it matter? It matters because in the UK this year, it's the first time that we've reached a tipping point. There are now more people in the workplace who are looking after someone over 65 than someone under 15. And yet almost every company has a benefit in place to help you with early years childcare, some kind of support for mothers. Obviously it's great now, we're sort of seeing more and more support for menopause and things like this. But what people don't know is 60% of people who are carers are women, but 40% are men. And the reason why this is because there are actually a lot of, 44% of the UK are families with only one child. And what that means is when your dad or your mum goes into hospital, you are the default person they're going to call. You're on speed dial. It doesn't matter if it's 3 a.m. in the morning or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You get the phone call. And if you're the only child, you get that phone call. If you're divorced, the spouse doesn't come into it, so you also get the phone call. Now, what we've also seen is the reason why there's more women than men is because if you're married, women tend to take on the responsibilities of caregiving for the in-laws as well. So if you're a sandwich generation like me, where I have a teenage kid and I have a husband and in-laws, you're basically juggling upwards and you're juggling downwards and you're juggling a job. So it's quite a defining moment. And the reason why I raise this here is because over the next 20 years, this is only going to get worse, not better, for every single company in this country. And why is this an issue? It's because even though we know, everyone uses the word aging population now, it's quite well covered. I think the chief medical officer of NHS wrote an article about it in the Times last week, and they said it's probably the biggest challenge they're going to face in the next coming decades. People are living longer, but they're actually getting sicker earlier. And so that means in the olden days, you might get, I think your health span is until you're around 71. And then your life expectancy might be 10 years from there. Now it's stretching to 15. And in fact, someone born this decade is going to live to 101 by the time they become an adult, retire, etc. So there's great medications out there that helps you live longer, but not necessarily healthier for longer. And that means that every single person in the workforce who's dealing with a family member who is sick has to take this into account. It's not an option. And I realized it wasn't an option for me. I can't switch off my dad and say, hey, 5 p.m. I'm done. I'm not a caregiver anymore. I'm a caregiver. And that's just the reality. So when I said we're not alone, we're definitely not alone. The UK is one of many, many countries, all advanced economies in the world. I'd say the US is actually slightly better. There's 55 million caregivers there who are caring for someone who's an adult, but it's slightly better there because they've got net positive immigration, and that's the only reason why, but they still have an aging population. Other than the Middle East and parts of India, all economies are facing the same issue. We recently got approached by the Singaporean government because their NHS equivalent has tripled their budget in the last 5 years to try and deal with an aging population problem. And in Japan, 1 in 3 people are now over 65. And there you have a net negative population, so there's actually less and less people coming into the workforce and more people retiring and living longer. So why does this matter? The government cares, and therefore they are trying to understand what is the role of the employer in this whole conundrum. We've read a lot about the NHS and what matters. Today, so November 23rd, is a really special day because today is actually Carers' Rights Day. And Carers' Rights Day means that companies are beginning to celebrate and talk about what it means to be an adult carer in the workplace. In the past, it's been a stigma. In the past, it's been something that people try to hide away from. It is not very sexy to say, I had to help my mom have a bath last night, or I had to go and clip the nail. I literally spoke to a senior partner of a recruiter about 2 months ago, and he said, I'm one of the senior partners here. It's okay when I talk about going to hospital every night to help my dad feed himself or clip his nails. But he said, it really occurred to me, if someone's more junior, Steph, they probably are quite embarrassed to talk about that. When you have a 9-month baby bump and everyone celebrates, and it's great, but when you're coming in every day saying, my mom's got MS or my mom's got dementia, they'll be nice the first time round, and then what do you say after that? There's still a level of kind of awkwardness about it. So what the government has done is they've enacted 2 new laws this year. One's called the Carers Leave Act and one's called the Flexible Working Act. And the Carers Leave Act, it was announced in May 2023. It was passed through the House of Lords. And what it means is by Q1 of next year, every single employer in the country has to formally understand who is a carer in their workplace, both for childcare and adult care. And it doesn't have to be even someone that you're looking after who's a blood relative. You could be looking after your next door neighbor and you still term as a carer. But the reason why is because now carers have rights, and the employer has to make sure those rights are protected. The right, and you should read the right, it's actually very interesting the way they've defined a carer. But at minimum, you have to let your employee take a week off on top of their annual leave. It's not paid, but a lot of employers have now implemented it where it is paid. Flexible working also means that if your employee demands time to work around for caregiving needs or other needs, you have to find a way to accommodate that, and it needs to be sort of demonstrable, so that if they ever kind of brought a case against discrimination, you can't say, well, I didn't know. If they've requested, under the Flexible Working Act, they are protected in that way. And it is seen as a positive thing by charities like Carers UK, who are talking a lot about how they can protect carers. It may not always be a convenience for smaller employees, for example, but it's a way for employers and employees to really connect over what is essentially a part of your life. So how does it translate into numbers? I'll start from the right. £8.2 billion is lost every year in productivity from people who leave the workforce or go part-time because of caring needs. There's about, as I mentioned, 2.1 million people become new caregivers every year. 600 people quit every day through caregiver burnout, and a lot of them go part-time. Women are 4 times more likely to go part-time or quit their job as soon as they become a caregiver for someone who's an adult in their family. And 2.6 million people are financially worse off. So some of them have quit, some of them have gone part-time, and this significantly contributes to what we call the gender pay gap and the what we call the pension gap as well. It's not all based on gender, of course, but unfortunately it's proportionally more towards women. Okay, so how do you, ooh, that's an interesting slide. Okay, so the version I've got, it says the number one thing you should do to get ahead of this is not to say, oh my goodness, another thing I have to worry about. It's get to know your carers in the workplace. The first thing you can do to solve for this, there's less and less younger people coming into the workforce, so it's a dwindling birth rate. So everyone's fighting for talent coming out of university, and you're probably putting a lot of marketing spend or recruiting spend towards trying to get them in. But actually, the bulk of the workforce over the next couple of decades is those between 40 and 55. These are the people who are coming into carers' needs. They want to know that you care. Phoenix did a study last year that where they interviewed something like 6,000 employees, and 30% of them said they would choose an employer who actually had adult care, like recognized adult care needs, versus one who doesn't, because they know that's a reality they have to deal with. So the first thing is get to know your workforce, figure out how prevalent is this in the organization. And it sounds probably quite easy, but it's not. And the reason why I say that is most people don't actually realize they're a carer. So the reason why we ask the question right at the beginning is because most people just say, well, I'm being a good daughter, I'm being a good husband, I'm being a good wife, I'm being a good grandchild even, or my mum asked me to do this, or I have to take time off and drive so-and-so to hospital. You're a carer, but you don't use that term. It took me about 10 years to figure out I'm a carer. And that's because I'm probably a bit more attuned to demographics and things like this, but it's a reality. And until they know they are, they don't know there's a solution that can actually help them. And so what Phoenix Group did, which is one of our clients, is they implemented something called a carer's passport. So the minute you join the company, they will run you through a series of scenarios that helps you identify whether you're an adult carer, or you could be a child carer, or you could be, another type of identity. But really what that means is this is now in your manager's hand, and he or she knows upfront that you are a carer, and if ever that need comes, then these are potentially some of the hurdles or challenges you might face. We help a lot of people do manager training in their workforce, and that's really important. So, for example, if someone suddenly says, my dad's gone to hospital and they're off for 2 weeks, they might even think I need to quit, or they become very depressed. What are the right things to say? Or if someone's even passed away and they're trying to reintegrate into the workforce, they were a carer for a couple of months, how do you then speak to that person and ensure that you retain your talent where it's needed? This all sort of stems from the carer's passport, knowing up front who they are. And this forms part of sort of the education and the recognition and the communication of what is needed. So from the education side, both the carer and the workforce need to learn how to deal with each other. So the carer coming into the understanding of who they are and what their reality is, and what that journey might be. There's a slide I didn't include today, but there's actually 6 stages of caring. The first stage is when you go, so Christmas is an interesting time for us. We see this a lot. You go home for dinner, you don't live with your parents, probably 2-3 hours drive away, and you've noticed your mom's kind of become slightly more forgetful than usual, or my mom, for example, she started shaking. And that's just a sign of age and frailty. All the way to, okay, it's pretty bad, we now need to seek hospice care. Those are the 6 stages. In the middle, stage 3, we see a lot of people like this. It's normally my mom or my dad or my grandma has fallen over and broken her hip, or fell and hit her head on a concrete pavement somewhere and is now in A&E. We call that stage 3. It's where you suddenly are plucked into this and say, oh my goodness, like, everyone's got to attend to this situation now. We always say stage 1 is a much better place to be, and that's why the carer passport is important. The education to understand you can get ahead of this. It's not something that's a bad thing. It's just part of life, but you can get ahead of it in terms of what you can do to support your employee. And communication is one thing where we've seen has been really helpful. Any employer who set up a carer network within their own organization, where there's internal champions, are able to surface some of the problems that employees face, and they're able to talk about it. And therefore, it's no longer a stigma in the workplace. And that's why Carers' Rights Day is such an important thing. It just puts a label on the front of the can and say, this is reality, this is what it is, and this is how important it is. And then as employers, the third thing to do is to really review what your internal benefits are. So, for example, we were speaking to someone the other day, they had legal power of attorney as a benefit. That's great, actually. That's really important as part of your care journey. Because if someone in your family is being diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, you probably want that in place straight away. We sometimes get calls where someone is trying to make a decision for their parent, but they can't anymore because they didn't have a power of attorney in place and the doctor won't let them. They said, look, you don't have control over this person. You don't have power of attorney in place, and they are not now able to make their own decisions. We as the doctors are going to make the decisions for you. And that's a really, not always a pretty place to be as a family trying to make hard decisions. So review them, and you can actually come up with what we call a portfolio approach to supporting a carer in the workplace when that time comes. A little bit about sort of solutions that are on the market today. Obviously, KareHero, we do some of this. You need a care assessment for your family. If you're coming into a carer's situation, get a care assessment in place for the person that your employee is looking after. They will need funding. 50% of eligible funding in this country is not applied for. We recently worked with Phoenix Group, one of our clients. Over the last 3 months, we've helped put £200,000 of money back into their employees' wallets at a time of cost of living crisis that is really critical. Some people quit their jobs before even realizing that actually they can get funding. And so that's a conversation you should be having with your employee. And then emergency care. Like when you have hospital admissions and discharge problems, some people are staying in their beds way too longer than they need to be. You need advice. And that's where people like ourselves can come in. And the red light's flashing, so I'm going to talk quicker. So lastly, supporting carers is really important in the workplace because it's actually good for business. If you can retain your talent, you improve your DEI. A lot of people here probably have to put gender pay gap reports out every year. There is real pressure on women as well as men, but more so women, on trying to stay in the workforce and looking after lots of other caring duties outside. And it really makes yourself much more fit for future. And so I won't go through all of them. But lastly, the way you help your employees thrive, help your employees stay healthy and thrive at work. So it's a very complex journey, caregiving, but it can be simplified. And there are solutions now out there that can help you do that. So hope that was helpful for you, and thank you very much for listening.